Good morning, ladies and germs. This is your ticker guy update for the 22nd. We are doing politics and coronavirus. Got to do coronavirus. There's some kind of bad news in here. Not sure exactly how bad yet, but I'm not liking the developments. Okay, let's just leave it at that for the moment. If you don't want to hear the politics, I'll stick the time stamp for the coronavirus update on the top of the ticker where the time is. That's what I usually do. Not always. Sometimes I just make you listen. Well, it's caucus day today. Tonight, of course, is when they're actually held. But there's very little in the way of coverage. In fact, interestingly enough, among the so-called major news sites, Fox is basically ignoring this. And CNN has an article on the front page, which is partway down, with regards to Sanders looking for a breakaway win, and has their 6 things to watch for during the caucuses tonight, and yada 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 yada. The polling says that he is probably going to win by a substantial number in Nevada. In other words, I wouldn't be at all surprised if Sanders wins by a double-digit percentage, and if he does, then at that point, folks, I think we are well into the realm where he is very, very likely to be the nominee on the first ballot, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, for the DNC to blockade him and stop him. Now, remember the way that the conventions work is that you have to have enough votes on the first ballot, at least on the Democrat side. I haven't paid attention to any rules changes the Republicans may have made because, of course, Trump is going to be the nominee. But on the Democrat side, you must have a majority of the ballots on the first round, and if you don't, then the convention is essentially open. So if you come into the convention with more than 2 viable candidates, more than 2 that actually go all the way, and basically make your life difficult, it is quite probable that you will end up with less than 50%. And if you do, then the convention is no longer a slam dunk kind of thing. If it's a 2-person contest at the time that you get there, then it's extremely likely, if not nearly certain, that there'll be a first ballot victory. But what we don't know, though, is that that's the case. Now, Nevada's caucuses have a viability threshold of 15%. You have to get there to get any delegates in each precinct. So places where these candidates fall short, and where the real risks for this are in terms of getting 0 delegates are for Klobuchar, of course, but Steyer. But I think Steyer's out of this game. He's the only reason he's still in it at all is because he's paying for it himself. He's got a lot of money. But I think Biden potentially gets hammered. And if he does not get somewhere out of Nevada with a fairly strong showing, he's in a lot of trouble because the problem is that now you got Super Tuesday, which is March 3rd. That's coming up here. It's not very far away, a little more than a week. And so, next Tuesday it'll be a week out. Steyer has spent a lot of money on television ads in Nevada. I haven't seen anything, but Steyer's blown about $15 million on TV. And so he needs to get something out of it. And then the other thing is Warren needs to get something out of it. And Warren's got problems in a big way. Part of the other problem is that there were about, according to the numbers I'm seeing, about 75,000 early ballots that were cast in Nevada before the debate. And so those people cannot vote again from the caucus perspective and from and some of these other things. And so, the caucuses don't get subject to early votes. But the problem is that the Super Tuesday states, there's early voting in some of these primary areas. And where there is, if you've already voted, you can't vote again. Wait a minute. If you're in Chicago, you can vote early and often, right? Remember that? Yeah. So I think there's a real issue here, but Sanders needs to be able to generate a winning coalition, and we'll see what happens because Nevada is a complicated state. Most of the people in Nevada are in Las Vegas and Reno. All right, and so Las Vegas is Clark County, but not everybody, of course. The thing is that Las Vegas is a very strong union area, specifically the culinary workers unions that deal with all the casino workers and such. And so there is some real issues there because unions are kind of a funny thing, but we'll see. So we'll find out. We'll see whether, first off, we'll see whether or not this actually works. Remember in Iowa, we didn't actually get caucus results on the night of the caucus. So, we'll see what happens with that. But my suspicion is that you got a lot of trouble here. And, I'm not sure what we're going to happen at this particular point. And I think bottom line here is that Steyer's crazy. And he needs to. I don't understand why he's here. Okay, I just don't see it. I mean the only thing that he's he could take credit for is that he's got an anti-Trump group called Need to Impeach that was one of the driving forces behind Trump's impeachment. Well, I got bad news for you folks. If all you're running on is throwing the current guy out of office, okay, then you're running a campaign that ultimately implodes. And the reason it implodes is that first off, you have to say the other guy sucks. That's part of politics. But you have to be able to put forward an idea for what your view of the world and the political world and the campaign is. You have to have some side that amounts to a positive message. Where is it? Okay, you have to. You just have to. And I don't see that out of Steyer. And without it, I just don't see how he gets anywhere. But we'll see. We'll see. I think, a win is a win is a win. Well, we'll see about that too. I think there's a problem with that. And so, but again, the people who I think potentially get knocked out here, at least from a standpoint of being badly damaged going into Super Tuesday, would be Klobuchar. Frankly, I don't see how she gets enough. It's funny that at first blush it looks like she doesn't really have any damage. Okay, in other words, she doesn't have the big negatives the other people have that can be hung around her neck. And then as you dig in a little more, oh wait a minute, she does. There's prosecutions, there's minority issues, she's got a black problem, in other words, just like everybody else in the field, which is kind of, you think about this. We have a party that has such a weak field, they can't put anybody up as a potential presidential candidate who doesn't have a serious problem with the black community. Think about the craziness of this, all right? And you have a vice president that, former vice president, the former Biden, who not only does he have all sorts of issues with his record, because he has a long one, but the guy's a creep. Would you... I know this, maybe this shouldn't be a test, maybe it should. But it is one that I think that voters will reasonably use, and that is, would you leave your 6-year-old child alone in a room with the person who wants to be president for 15 minutes while, all of a sudden you have an urgent need, and so you go to the can, and you have a 6-year-old. Would you leave your 6-year-old in the company of that person, otherwise unattended, for 10 or 15 minutes? Will you go take a long steaming one? And are you comfortable doing that? Are you reasonably sure that when you came back, your 6-year-old would be just fine? I don't know that you could say that about Joe Biden. The sniffing the hair thing, and holy crap! I actually would not leave my young child alone in a room with Joe Biden. I'm not sure okay, now this is going to be my personal prejudice showing. I'm not sure I'd leave my young child alone with Pete Buttplug. And I don't know. I don't know that I would. I have to think about it. Is it just the gay thing? No. It's not. It's also what color is the skin of my child and what's his record with when it comes to minorities. I mean, people are going to, I know I'm probably going to get attacked for this. I'll probably get several downvotes when people say, oh, you just don't like gay people. It has nothing to do with that, guys. Jesus, anyone that wants to attack me on that basis, I wish you'd been around me in the 1990s when I was running MCS. You should have walked through my office. All right? I mean, seriously. My best salesman was both black and gay as the day is long. And I mean, we're talking black as coal, okay? Not light-skinned black, black. My customer service manager, Liz, was also black. Now, she was heterosexual. She had a boyfriend, so I'm assuming she's heterosexual. But she was also black. And I had multiple people working for me that were flamboyantly gay. So the idea that this has something to do with gayness is just bullshit. What it has to do with is the fact that that Buttplug has displayed during his time as mayor a serious bias when it comes to people of color. And I've got problems with that. And I know I get attacked all the time. I've gotten plenty of hate mail over the years that, well, you can't possibly understand this because you are not black. So if you're not black, you can't understand it, blah, blah, blah. Oh, bullshit, folks. Listen, the color of your skin shouldn't have anything to do with anything. If it does, that's where the problem is. If you want to put forward the premise that somebody has an issue because of their skin color, you're the racist. And that's just, those are just facts. I know, no, you can't be racist unless you're white. Oh, bullshit. Some of the most racist people I've ever met have been black. Shortly, well, you know what? I'm not sure if they're the more racist than some of the Asians I've run into. Some Asian people are extraordinarily racist. Of course, in favor of their own skin. People are tribal. That's not, The real question is when it comes to other than your personal relationships, who you go drink with at the bar, does not having a bunch of close associates that you go drink with at the bar or whatever demonstrate that you're a racist? No, it doesn't. If you're running a company and the labor pool in your area is full of people that are either of color or are gay or whatever, and those people are qualified. We're not talking about a bunch of high school dropouts here for people that actually have to be able to read and write and do math and such. If you have an all-white company in such a place, might that demonstrate a problem? Maybe. That one now maybe gets onto the radar, but a lot of this other stuff does not. Anyway, I think one of the things that's interesting about this is just the lack of coverage. And I'm wondering whether or not what's going on in the media, and I think this is important, is if this is the case, then what are we having here? Are we having the establishment media essentially abandon the Democrat Party because Joe Biden is losing and Bernie Sanders is winning? I want to spend a little more time on that for another reason. It has come out in the last few days that China has infiltrated itself into our media organizations. And now we have this new allegation that both Bernie Sanders and Trump are being backed by Russia. That's just come out. Now, where is this? Why is this sort of nonsense, which was thoroughly debunked? I mean, we spent millions of dollars with Mueller trying to find some evidence that Russia and Trump conspired together during the last election and failed. All right, and failed. Why is it that we are going down this road again now, and why are they targeting Sanders? And folks, if you think this Russia thing is real, you got rocks in your head. Let me tell you what I think is really going on. All right. And I think we ought to look into this with a great deal of care, and we ought to get very aggressive about it. And that is that it appears that the Chinese Communist Party has infiltrated itself into multiple news outlets and multiple media centers in the United States, just as they have with our university systems all the way down to our K-12 schools. This bullshit must be stopped. Folks, we are not talking about a free people and a free country where the ordinary proles, the ordinary citizens of China are working for, whatever, right? New York Times, whatever have you. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the Communist Party, official government interference in United States affairs and in the United States media. That is an outrage. China does not allow that sort of thing to go on. We pegged them on this, and they turned around and threw 3 Wall Street Journal reporters out of the country in this last week because all of a sudden they got all pissed off that the Wall Street Journal wrote a story they didn't like and used some language that they thought was insulting. Okay? And gee, that's never happened before. Oh, you mean it has? So why did they all of a sudden revoke visas and throw people out of the nation? Because the truth is that there was reporting on the fact that we'd caught them interfering not only in our political process, but in our media. And suddenly, here comes the slam. All right, folks, we had better stop this. This is a country that, if it could, would destroy us. And they're going to try. And we'd better stop them. And we're not going to have a lot of time to continue to work at this if we don't get our butts on it pretty much now. I hate to get very negative about this with regards to our government and the future of the United States, but I got to tell you something. These folks, if you don't think they're a threat, if you don't think this is an aggressive nation that is willing to do damn near anything to get what they want, and that includes doing things that we would consider to be illegal, flat out illegal, but all by subterfuge, getting media companies to run stories as news and essentially paying them to do it. Folks, that sort of bias isn't just bias. It's bribery, and it's being undertaken by a bunch of communists that control another nation. That has to stop. I don't even know if that's legal. I'm trying to roll around in my head. Okay, where's the law that makes that an unlawful act? I'm not sure where it is. But, boy, it's one thing to run opinion pieces that are clearly labeled as opinion pieces with the sourcing and the fact that they were paid and how much was paid. It's quite another to run pieces that are claiming to be news but don't have those things in there, those elements. So people do not have disclosure. That looks like news. And yet, this is what happens when you let your media be sold. It's one, listen, advertising is a different story, all right? Although this is also the hazard when you have newsrooms that allow advertisers to call them up and say, spike that story or we're going to pull our advertising. Now it's extended to governments, hostile governments, communist governments that are explicitly paying media outlets in the United States to run stories, without labeling them as opinion pieces, without labeling them as being funded by that communist government. Folks, I do believe that when it comes to peddling foreign influence, we do have a law, and this is called FARA, and I think it would apply here. All right? It certainly should if it doesn't. And if it doesn't, we need to do something to fix that. All right, let's talk coronavirus. Boy, that went long, 19 minutes. Alrighty, we have some very bad news here on the coronavirus front, and I don't like it one little bit. In fact, it's extremely bad. The first thing is that the Chinese data, I think at this point you have to assume that they are not reporting the truth. Their curve has greatly flattened out. As of this morning, when I last checked this, their count in China stands at 76,300 infected. I'm not buying that. 2,300 dead. And they're claiming 21,000 recovered, which I'm not. And again, they changed their methodology again. Okay, remember there was this big spike when they said that they were going to take essentially CT scans and use that as a diagnostic tool. Now apparently they've changed that again. Listen, without consistency in methodology, the data's worthless. And so this is turning into a clown show, because if what China's doing is essentially excluding using chest films when they were before, then there's probably a 2 or 3 week period here where you're going to see another distortion in the data until whatever their methodology is catches up with them. You can't trust anything that they say. It's all bullshit. But what I don't like is we've now had 2 serious spikes out of South Korea, essentially 2 doublings. Both center around this one area in the southeast, the church, which is a very large church apparently, where this super spread event happened, and then a hospital related to it. I don't know precisely what the sanitation situation is in that part of South Korea. But remember, South Korea, folks, is not a Western white man good sanitation area, except in places like Seoul and where the Winter Olympics were held to the east. Pyongyang, I think that's the name of the city. Those 2 areas are. The rest of the country, not so much. Public toilets are typically open pit. They do not have running water. They do not have soap. And they do not have paper towels. This is extremely common all over Southeast Asia. And so, in fact, it's basically, that's what it is in Southeast Asia. Where is that not the case? Japan. We've had, but then again, remember that some of these Japanese cases came off that cruise ship. Now, we also have another interesting piece of information, and this is not good, and that is that we had these people that were taken off the Diamond Princess. They were flown back to the United States. They supposedly in alleged isolation for those people who were actually doing some of these other things that were going on. In other words, they took these people, they flew them back in supposed isolation units alongside people who were sick. I don't know about that. How do you do an isolation unit in an aircraft when you have one source of bleed air? And I'm not buying this so-called isolation. Okay, I'm just not. But if you think about this, you got all these people in this little tin can that are doing this long flight back into the United States, and all of a sudden, oh my God, what do we got here? We got 14 people that tested positive, and out of 328. Okay, now think about the situation here. You got 328 people on buses. They don't all fit on one bus. Mixed among them are 14 people who have tested positive. All right, now a couple of them. Now, supposedly, these 14 were non-symptomatic at the time they got on the planes, but a couple of them developed symptoms on the flight. Ugh. All right. When they get back into the United States, 11 were deemed high risk and were confirmed to have the infection. 12 of those people are currently at the National Quarantine Center in Omaha. One was transferred to a biocontainment unit. Okay, now this is a guy who actually developed symptoms. He was symptomatic, and he had some kind of underlying condition. Not sure exactly what it is. There's somebody saying that he's got Guillain-Barré syndrome. Who knows whether or not that's an underlying condition, but who knows? I'm not sure exactly what that's about. But now here's the interesting thing. Is that we've got a report out of ABC 14 that says that 11 of them have now tested positive, but then is that the same 11 or is that 11 new cases? Well, I'm not sure. I think we've got those among the evacuees, okay, because what you've got now is the total count was 27. Now, this article's a couple days old, okay? The byline on it is the 21st, so it was published yesterday. But remember, 27, we had 15, okay, in the United States. Now, all of a sudden, though, When I look at this, I see 35. So I'm like, what exactly is going on here? All right. So again, I think what we have is this wasn't new people who had been who developed it as a result of the flights. Okay, in other words, the cross contamination does not appear to have taken place yet. So I'm not sure what we got here. And again, we have a couple people. Sounds like there were 4 that had pending tests, and those came back positive during the flight. So again, I'm still not seeing anything here. Look, you got 300 people that have been brought out of Japan. Of them, about a dozen were positive, knowingly positive, flown back on the same airplane, which I think was a huge mistake. But again, as I have said before, it is my contention that doing that was essentially a human petri dish kind of situation, and that the United States is going to get a great deal of information out of this. Unfortunately, more or less unwillingly at the expense of the people who were there. But what else would you do? All right, think about this. If you're a non-symptomatic, non-positive case and you're on this ship and everybody around you is getting it, you can refuse the transport. But if you do, you're stuck. Now, your probability of ending up positive is probably higher than if you sit on the plane for some number of hours with at least some element of isolation from the other people. Who knows how effective, but some element of isolation. And then you get back to the United States, and and at least theoretically, once you get back here to the United States, you've got some level of reasonable protection. I do not know what I think about this. Okay, I don't know what I mean, if I was in this position, which way would I go on this? I'm not entirely sure, but I think we're going to see what happens very soon in the next 2 weeks, because these people are going to be quarantined for at least 2 weeks. And I think that's that's kind of where we go here, and so there you go. There you go. I think there's definitely something going on with regards to this, but you have to get those people out of there. And if I was one of those people on that ship, I probably would have taken the flight. I would have taken the risk. I know it's like a 23-hour flight or whatever, 18-hour flight. Depends on where you're coming into, I suppose. But out of Japan, it's more than 12. Okay, so you're going to be sitting in a tin can with forced air induction. Everyone's breathing the same air. It's all coming off the bleed air off the compressors of the engines. And then at that point, there you go. And here we get back in the United States now. How good is the isolation that these people have that are mixed in? I don't think it's a lot. I don't think it's a lot at all. And so I think there's a problem, a real problem. And I would be. But we're going to get information on this. Look, there is currently, again, in places where there is confirmed white man good sanitation, we've not seen these breakouts. We've not seen these clusters. They haven't happened yet. That's not to say they can't. And I am more concerned. South Korea is of quite significant concern to me. But again, where? All right, now you've had a case or two here and there in the white man sanitation good areas of South Korea, but you haven't had a cluster. It's important. I want to see, folks. Listen, I know everybody is thinking, airborne. I'm telling you, the evidence doesn't match with that. That's not the evidence. All right, but if you are not in a position where you could slam your door in the United States for a month or longer, if you get a breakout in your area, you're going to get very little notice if it happens. All right, because until you get some kind of a breakout in a given area, going into hiding is just a fool's game. All right, but at the point that it occurs, frankly, you might have less than 24 hours to make a decision. And if you think you're going to go run into another Petri dish, your store, and go grab a bunch of supplies at that point, first off, there isn't going to be anything there. The store's going to be stripped to the bare shelves within an hour. Secondly, you just expose yourself to anybody else that might be in your community that happens to be positive. So now you're going to self-quarantine your house, and if you get sick, tough shit. Now, if you gotta take that last risk of exposure, well, then you gotta. But wouldn't it be better if you didn't have to? Wouldn't you be in a way better position if you were able to just pull up the ladder, so to speak, bolt the hatch closed, and say, F this. Now, if you got to go to work because you got to make some money, you got to survive, whatever, you got problems. The economy, you think this isn't going to hit the economy? Boy, are you wrong. China is restarting their production and their economic stuff because they have to. Is it the right thing to do from a public health point of view? I'm not sure it is. Are you going to be able to prevent this from getting out in other places? Probably not. I think it's the fact that you're now seeing cases in places like Iran and they're being spread into other areas means that we are now in a part of this situation where all those places that have other than white man sanitation good are now at risk because the virus has been seeded into other parts of the world. It has occurred. And if it gets into a place where and if I'm right about my hypothesis, if you live in a place where the sanitation is not up to white man sanitation good standards, you are at significant risk. There's no way around this. When I start to see breakouts in places where that is not called into question, that's when I get truly worried about this thing getting into places like the Western European nations on an uncontained basis and in the United States. Australia, for example, which is part of that world, even though it's in the East rather than the West. But Germany, things like this. The individual case that comes from a traveler does not evidence this. You start to see widespread breakout style community transmission in places where people go to the throne and they have a sewer system and it actually works and they put their TP down the hole. It doesn't sit in a can that sits out there, and they don't mop the floor where the hole is that you take a crap into with just a bare mop and spread the stuff all over the. And even worse, you go into the bathroom, there is no toilet paper, there is no running water to wash your hands with, and there's no soap. So, again, today, we're not seeing that evidence. The South Korean thing is concerning, but thus far, the South Korean spread appears to be in parts of the country where that sanitation is called into question. You see one of these super spread outbreak kind of situations come up in Seoul, and all of a sudden I get very worried. Okay? So watch where these events happen. Not the event, where it is. Again, you get one of these in places, get one in the United States. People that say that the CDC's trying to cover this stuff up in the U.S., 2 or 3 cases. There's a report that Florida, as a state, is refusing to release information. That appears to be true. That's bullshit, by the way. The idea that you're somehow going to help things by keeping it quiet is wrong. Truthful, honest information is the only way you're going to get a handle on this. But if you think you're going to get it out of the governments of the world, including the Chinese, you're dead wrong. You're not even here in the U.S. It's not going to happen. What are you going to do? If they tell you to pound sand in your reporter, sue them? That's nice. The case will work its way through the courts, and in 6 months or a year, you'll get a resolution, and they'll probably be ordered to produce the data. By then, if it's a problem here in the United States, whoever was going to die will be dead. The other thing is that all the data at this point says that if you are not old or immunocompromised, you are quite likely to get a case of this thing that's mild enough that you don't even end up needing medical attention. Of course, there are going to be the outliers. There are going to be the exceptions, and those exceptions are going to suck. But that's what it looks like at this point. So here we go, folks. Probably no update tomorrow unless there's something dramatic that happens. But we'll be back on it on Monday because, of course, Monday's the start of a new week. And it'll be fascinating, again, on the political side to see what happens tonight in the caucuses in Nevada. I'm your ticket guy. Have a good one.